We're very honored to be joined by professional triathlete, coach, and Ironman Live commentator, and just super cool lady, Miss Dede Griesbauer. So for many of you, the introduction won't be necessary because you know who she is, but just in case you don't know, during the beginning of her athletic career, Dede swam at Stanford University, and she was a 10-time NCAA All American, and she represented the U.S. as part of the USA swimming national team from 89 to 94. And then professionally, she worked on Wall Street as an equity trader, and she was the vice president of an investment management firm. And just after 2 years of competing as an age group triathlete, she decided to go pro. And since then, she's achieved incredible success as a pro triathlete with a career that spanned over 18 years. She's a 3-time IRONMAN champion, 2-time 70.3 champion, and a 3-time top 10 Kona finisher. But what she seems to be doing lately is break records. So in 2016, she was the 12-hour time trial world champion, setting a course record of 258 miles, beating everyone, including all the men in the process. In 2020, she set the Ultraman Florida record of 22 hours, 48 minutes, and 31 seconds. But most notably, just last year, she was the Ultraman World Champion, breaking the course record by 45 minutes in a time of 23 hours, 52 minutes, and 58 seconds at the age of 52. So she's also, where you might recognize her voice, is she's part of the color commentary team for Ironman Live. So she commentates on races, and she was actually, she just did Gulf Coast this past weekend, and we had a lot of our athletes competed there. So welcome.
I hope you guys were okay. I noticed that Beach Road had an awful lot of construction on it, and I was worried about the congestion on that road when all the age troopers came through, because it was pretty scary when the pros went through. So I hope everybody was safe.
I think everyone had good races, and we had some first timers and some winning relay teams. So I think we had a good showing there.
Awesome.
But so we kind of wanted to talk to you today because you are experiencing an incredible level of success as a professional triathlete, and you've been in the sport for so long. So we kind of wanted to talk to you about kind of how the sport's changed over the years. So what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the past 10, 20 years in the sport?
I mean, first and foremost would be the opportunities to race. It's weird because while I feel like Ironman has grown exponentially, and there are other race organizations that have come up, you've got Challenge, you've got Clash, you've got, now for professionals, you've got the PTO races. At that level, there are a lot of opportunities to race, but at the same time, I feel like we've witnessed almost the death of the local triathlon, which I think ultimately is kind of hurting our sport. And I don't know if that's just the economics of local races, because putting races on operationally is extremely complicated. Permits and road closures and keeping everybody safe, and maybe to keep it affordable at a local level, that's just not possible. I don't know what's driving that, but it's this interesting dichotomy of growth in Ironman, growth in 70.3 races, but almost like if you want to find a local triathlon in your community, it's really hard to do. It's harder to do, I feel like, than when I started in the sport. When I started the sport, I was in Boston, and there were so many different race series that almost any given weekend you could rock up to Wampatuck State Park, and there would be a triathlon, a sprint distance, an Olympic distance. And within a 90-minute driving range, driving time, you could find a local triathlon almost every weekend. And I don't think that's the case anymore. And I think ultimately and almost long-term, that's going to hurt our sport. Because entering the sport through a 70.3 or an Ironman it's a really rough way to go at it. So that's certainly one thing I've noticed. And then the other thing would be obviously things, the technology. I almost have to believe that bike technology has sort of reached a plateau. I don't know how we're going to make these bikes any faster, and while bikes can be ridiculously expensive, I think even now, like an entry level bike, you're still getting like to buy an entry level time trial bike, you're buying what I first rode as like an elite top of the line time trial bike 20 years ago. So I feel like the technology has gotten better, and while it's still not cheap, I feel like the entry level products have risen to a level that you can be very, very competitive at the entry level. And now we've just gotten a little bit crazy because some of the top end bikes cost more than a car. But some of that technology, I think, has made us faster. And now we're looking at like the evolution of shoe technology and swim skins and things like that. So making wetsuits faster, and all of it is contributing to this higher level of racing in the sport. Particularly trying to compete with some of the women now, the times that women are running off the bike is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, the fact that, you know, it used to be a huge deal if a woman could run 3 hours off the bike in an Ironman, and now you have to do that in order to be competitive. So the level of racing has gotten so significant as well, and I think that goes hand in hand with improvements in technology, you know, swim, bike, and run, also nutrition. You know, the sort of sports science and nutrition science has gotten so much better that we're developing foods that enable you to take 100 grams of carbohydrate an hour without throwing up all over yourself. Which I think back in the day, some of the products that were available weren't conducive to being able to process that amount of fuel. And now that the fuel is enabling us to, like, you can put more gas in the tank, which just enables you to go faster and faster and put out more power and more speed. So yeah, like lots of just developments and changes. It's weird if I sit and think about how much the sport has changed. I mean, I have been around for a long time, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but it's actually easy to look around at almost every turn and see things that are vastly different than when I first started in the sport.
And in addition to those technological changes and the advances in nutrition, I was wondering, like, personally, how do you feel your training methodology has changed from when you were, you know, just getting started in your 20s, and then as opposed to now? Like, how do you approach your race season?
Yeah, I've always been an athlete that has a coach. It's very in vogue right now for anybody that watched our coverage of Gulf Coast. Everyone is self-coached now. It's like the new fad. Like, I'm going to self-coach. I have always had a coach. I think it just makes my life is busy. It's super busy. And to sit down and try to think about, like, I write programs for, you know, 10 to 12 athletes, depending on how many I'm coaching at the time, to sit down and do that for myself as well. I defer to a coach because I think a coach takes the emotion out of your training as well, which makes it a lot simpler for me. It's interesting because the evolution of my coaches, and this was not by design, but my very first coach in the sport was Karen Smyers, who will be hopefully a familiar name to a lot of you guys. Karen is, I believe, to this date, the only woman to have won WTCS in this day and age, but ITU short course draft legal worlds and the Ironman World Championship in the same year. She won them about like 6 weeks apart. And if you think about that skill set and how different that style, it's like winning the 100-meter dash and the marathon at the Olympics. Like, it's unfathomable. Anyway, she lives in Boston. She was my very first coach in the sport. And I didn't know anything, but I knew I had this great role model and mentor and coach who had experienced so much in the sport. But I was also her training partner. And so Karen, let's just put it this way, Karen's not a fan of the 5-hour ride and the 20-mile long run on the weekend. And so I used to have these like negotiations with her. There was a time trial series in Boston every Thursday night in the spring, summer, and fall. And it was a 15K loop, relatively closed. I mean, it wasn't closed to traffic, but it was pretty quiet loop, and it was all right-hand turns. So it was pretty safe. And every Thursday night we would do the 15K time trial. And it just hurt so much. And I would like negotiate with her. I'm like, can I do a 5-hour ride instead? Like, I would trade a 5-hour ride for a 15K time trial, like any day, still to this day. But I think the blessing in that was that I was a pretty low volume, but high quality athlete. So I don't think my training hours with Karen, like if we were the last maybe 6 weeks going into an Ironman, we were maybe getting 22 hours. But for the most part, I was like in the 15 to 18 hour a week range, but doing a lot of high quality, a lot of track workouts, a lot of, obviously in Boston, we were doing a lot of indoor trainer rides and boosting fitness through that top end. Eventually when I left Karen, and I left Karen just because honestly, Karen wasn't training and racing as much anymore. So I lost my training partner. And I really, I got so much out of training with a squad. We were a squad of 2 effectively, but I got so much out of training with a squad that I moved on to I worked with another local coach in Boston for a very short period of time, and that was not a good fit for me. But then I moved and went to work with Siri Lindley. And that was my first time sort of going to sleepaway camp in triathlon. So I would go to squad camps for 4 to 8 weeks at a time away from home, and then go do a race, come home, see my husband for 10 days, and then go do it all over again. And it was great for me because I was training with, I mean, a ton of world-class athletes. And Siri, we were training a lot more volume. So I was doing a lot more work with Siri, but Siri's not one, she doesn't like the power meter. She doesn't like the metrics. It was all very much by feel, which I think is good as you're increasing your volume. Don't get emotionally attached to a number. Don't get emotionally attached to a pace. If you're doing more work, you're going to be more tired. So that pace might not come as easily. You sort of have to grow into it. I left Siri in 2015 and I'm now with Julie Dibbins. And I can say in all honesty, I'm training more volume and more quality combined than I have in my career, but it's been a very gradual process over 20 years. I've added strength training to my program probably in 2007. And I was working with a coach, actually a strength coach out of Boston, who is now like the #1 strength and conditioning coach for Major League Baseball. And he thought endurance athletes were ridiculous. And I can't say I disagreed with him, but very smart guy, but not specific to endurance sports. So I got strong. But when I moved to Boulder in 2013, and I'm convinced that living in Boulder has prolonged my career because it's like in the endurance athletes playground here. And with it are all of the resources to go to support that in terms of strength coaches, massage therapists, PTs, chiropractors, et cetera. The entire environment supports athletes doing what we do. But when I came to Boulder, I started working with a strength coach who almost was specialized in endurance sports. So now my strength training is a lot more specific to endurance sports, which doesn't at all. Everyone's thinking, oh, she must do like low weight, high reps for endurance type strength. No, pardon my French, I pick up heavy shit in the gym. Like I pick up heavy stuff, and anybody over 40, you need to be picking up heavy weight, but I'm also doing it in a very functional way, in ways that I probably can't explain because I'm not a certified strength and conditioning coach, but I have a very, very smart strength coach. I've added a nutrition counselor because that is my Achilles heel to this day. In fact, I just got an email from him before this started because since Ironman Texas, I have just fallen off the wagon in terms of like, it's not something that comes naturally to me. So I'll get to like 7 o'clock at night and be like, oh crap, I haven't eaten since breakfast. And so I've been bad. I deserved a little tongue lashing tonight. So yeah, so that's something that has also changed. So it's unusual and it seems a little inside out, but it's been for me a really natural progression of starting at 15 hours a week, graduating to 25 hours a week. Now I'm at 30 to 35 hours a week. But I've added all of the resources to help me continue to do that in terms of nutrition counseling, excellent strength work, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it sounds crazy because most people will assume that as you get older, you sort of taper down the amount of work you do, but I am doing more work now than I've ever done in my triathlon career, 100%.
And that was kind of interesting because we were talking about like what factors you believe have led to your longevity as a sport, which is obviously, the differences in training and the nutrition and adding the strength work. And I know a lot of us do strength work as well, which is always hard to fit in because you're like, I don't want to be sore for my bike ride the next day or my run, but it's important to keep us able to do all those other things.
Well, but so here's the thing, and I'll say this, the strength training, and it's hard from a time management perspective. It's really hard to do it at home. You can't do trap bar deadlifts in your basement unless you have fancy equipment, unless you have a really nice basement. But if you're consistent, it's the same way with running, right? Like if you haven't run for a while and you go out for a run, you're going to get sore. But after you've been running and when you're in the middle of your season, you'll go out and run, whatever your schedule is, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. And the runs make you tired, but they don't give you that DOMS soreness. I literally, like, my strength coach sort of giggles if I ever walk in. I'm like, hey, what we did the other day made me really sore. I don't get sore from the gym, but I do it 3 times a week and have done so for the last decade. So if you can be consistent with your strength training, and it doesn't have to be a lot, it can be a really dedicated 20-minute session 3 days a week with just really specific exercises to you and what matter and what's important for you and your physiology. But if you do it consistently, it actually won't make you sore.
Yeah, and I think it's something that definitely a lot of us probably should do and don't. So I was wondering if, we have a lot of masters athletes in our club, and I was wondering if you have any advice for those looking to gain a competitive edge, as you get older and as things start to change. Like how do you still, maintain the motivation? Because especially if you're racing for a long time, to keep training and setting new goals and when things are starting to change.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm very fortunate, and there are often times, and honestly, coming out of Ironman Texas was one of those times where I really and truly wish I didn't love the sport as much as I do, because it is thankless and heartbreaking. And I'm going to be honest, I've been doing it for 20 years, and there's more times than not, it sucks, right? You go into a race and things don't go according to plan. You've made this huge investment in the hours and hours of training, and something happens and your race slips off the plate sideways, right? And that is more often the result than the Ultraman World Championship win and the world record and this, that, and the other thing. Those things are few and far between, and it's the other stuff but I love the journey. I love the day-to-day. I love the schedule. I love going to bed at night exhausted. Like I just feel like I feel life. And so if you're struggling, I guess, make your training fun, make the journey is the destination, right? Like I never got into the sport, and it's interesting because I do see this difference amongst some of the pros. I never got into the sport thinking I was going to win Kona. I got into the sport being like, this sounds like a lot more fun than sitting on a trading desk, yelling at people all day and getting yelled at myself. Like I had ulcers. I had so much stress. I didn't like who I was becoming. And when I was presented with this opportunity, I was like, this is better. Let's see how good I can be at this. And so I never came to it with that mindset. I always came into it with how good can I be? And that stands true to this day. I'm 52 and I'm certainly never going to win the Ironman World Championship, but I'm curious at 52, how good can I be? Can I compete with women who are 30 years old and just starting their careers? And I find it sort of exciting. Like I don't mind going to the front of a race on the bike and finger wagging at these girls and being like, I'm old enough to be your mom. I dig it. I think it's fun. And I think I've rounded a corner, like, and everyone says, like, as you get older, you just don't give a, you know, anymore. And I truly don't give a anymore what people think of me out on the race course. I'm out there 100% for myself. And I know it's going to end one day soon. And I have that perspective that I'm not going to be able to race as a professional forever. But for now, I love the lifestyle. I love the training. I love seeing what's possible. So that to me is super exciting. And if you find, you know, certainly for a seasoned athlete that's been doing this for years and years and decades, that the spark is starting to go out of it, like, mix it up. Like, you guys have a great group, like, train with a group, you know, that makes it a lot more fun. Try a gravel race, like, try some different things. That was some of my curiosity with Ultraman, right? I just sort of thought, well, I've sort of done all these Ironmans. Like, I have a really hard time reading down the list of race options for the pros and being like, oh, I'm really excited to go to Western Massachusetts. Like, I just, like, some of that spark has gone, and that's what drew me to sort of the 12-hour time trial and to Ultraman and to just trying some different things. And that, you know, for you, that might not be forever. Maybe you dedicate a year to racing Xterra, and then you come back to triathlon and you find your bike handling skills have gotten better. Or your legs are stronger because you're running trails and hills and things like that. So if you find the spark going out, like, really ask yourself, what is your spark? Like, why are you here? And just do things within your program to reinforce that.
So we were talking about our Ultraman. So what I was wondering, because talking about the stage you are at in your career, it's almost like you're in the best shape of your life currently. So what are some big goals? Like, what is, you know, Kona may not be a goal, but I'm sure you have some things that you've been thinking about. Like, if it's not this season or, you know, next couple of years, is there something you want to achieve?
Well, yeah, it's funny because at Ultraman Awards in Hawaii, it's one of the cool things about Ultraman, actually. Every athlete who competes, whether or not they're an official finisher, that's the other thing. Ultraman, if you fail to make the swim cutoff on day one, they invite you back on day two. You can still compete, you just won't be an official finisher. So it's really sort of cool. And the fields are relatively small. Not every single, I'll take that back. Not every single. Most of the people I raced Ultraman with, both at Florida and Hawaii, their big thing is the Ultraman Ohana, and they are Ohana. Like, I have people that I raced Ultraman and I met them across 3 days. And if I reached out to them and I was like, guys, I need help, they would come running. Like, that's how strong the bond is, having raced. And I can't describe it. Like, my friend Hillary Biscay is the one who got me into Ultraman racing, or at least introduced me to what it was. And she's like, it's a little hokey and they're all about the Ohana, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, she's like, there's a group hug every morning before you start the race. And it's like day one, it's a little awkward. Like, you're standing next to these complete strangers and they do this little, like, free race thing. And by day 3, we're all like, group hug. So it's a super great vibe. So I was thinking, so anyway, so at Ultraman Awards, every athlete who competes, whether or not you're official finisher, they get 3 minutes to stand up and say whatever they want to say about their experience, thank their crews, read a poem, say nothing. Like, literally they get 3 minutes. And it's painstakingly long, but it's a really, really cool thing. And before I had my 3 minutes, they took the mic from me and they're like, we never give out free entry to Ultraman, but because you won and set a course record, we'd like to invite you back to compete again next year. And I was like, oh, hell no. I mean, and part of that wasn't because, like, I think it's the distance I was born to race. I'm naturally suited to it. If I open my Training Peaks and I see an 8-hour ride on my schedule, I'm not like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like, that is way better to me than a lot of other things that could be in there. So I like the mindset, the physicality of it. I'm really well suited to it, but I'll be honest, like I gave a lot of thought to sort of dropping the mic after Ultraman because I'm like, what else is there, right? I'm not going to go win Kona. But in all of those hours that I spent, and 98% of them were by myself when I was training for Ultraman Worlds last November, I did give some thought to like, is it time? Like, I don't want to be stinky fish or like moldy cheese that just sticks around too long. And I do want to retire from the sport while I still love it, because I've seen too many people that it does become a job and they hate it. And I don't want that. I've had so much love for this sport that I want to keep that even when I'm done. I want to be one of those people that that misses it, but is just so thankful for the journey and not hate it when it's over. Like I hated, middle school or whatever. I want to be really thankful for the opportunity. So the one thing that made me go, was to see if I could qualify for Kona as a pro at 52. My performance at Texas would indicate that the answer to that question is a resounding no, you cannot. But I think I train with a squad of people who are qualifying for Kona, and I measure up across the disciplines, like here and there. I think it's possible. I've been close a number of times over the last 3 or 4 years. I missed it by one slot at Whistler. I think I missed it by one slot at Lake Placid 2 years ago. So I'm close. I'm right there. I'll need a perfect race. I'll need a little luck in terms of who shows up. I'll need a lot of things to go my way. But for me, coming off the fitness that I had from Ultraman, I pulled up really well from Ultraman. And I honestly thought that after Ultraman, I would never want to exercise again, but that didn't happen either. So I just thought it's worth the investment to see if I can take a couple of cracks at it and qualify for Kona at 52, because no one's ever done it. And that to me would be pretty cool. And if I fail, I'm like, well, you're 52. What were you thinking? But it was worth it. It was worth it to try. So that's the motivation now. And as my husband jokes, I've raced one more year about 14 times now. So I might find more motivation when this year is over. But for me now, that was a goal that was worth going all in on. Yeah.
Definitely. And so looking back kind of over the course of your career, we have a couple of new triathletes in the club, which kind of just started in the sport. Yep. So I was wondering, what do you wish you knew when you were first starting? Like, what do you wish someone told you about triathlon and competing and training?
Imodium fixes all problems. No, just kidding. I'm totally joking. I had an interesting perspective when I came to the sport of triathlon, because I had an entire other athletic career. Like I thought my career and they didn't have professional swimming when I graduated from Stanford. I swam post-collegiately for a couple of years, because not dissimilar to my journey in triathlon, but my senior year in college, when most of the women I was training with on my team were burnt out from swimming. They couldn't wait to be done. They were sick of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going to the pool. They were sick of their hair turning green and smelling like chlorine and all of these things. And I was like, give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more. And I was still swimming best times as a senior in college. And I thought, well, just because college is over, why do I have to be done? It didn't make any sense to me, but there weren't the resources then for post-collegiate swimming. So I made my own resources. And I was one of the very first athletes to swim post-collegiately. And I got an awful lot of strange looks on the pool deck, I'll tell you that. But I realized when I was presented with the opportunity to race professionally as a triathlete, and it was Karen Smyers. I remember so distinctly. I can't remember the specific workout, but I was at her house. She had a room in her house set up with a couple of, remember the CompuTrainers of old? I love the CompuTrainer. A couple of CompuTrainers set up, and we were doing this workout, and we had just finished an interval, and she looks over at me, and I'm like trying to play it cool, like, yeah, this isn't that hard. Meanwhile, I'm like, and Karen says to me, she's like, would you ever consider quitting your job and racing professionally? She's like, I think you do a really good job. And it was like my guts leapt out of my skin. And I said yes before my brain could even process what had been said. It just was this thing I was so drawn to. But when I made the decision and I spoke to my husband pretty specifically about this, Because let's be honest, I gave up a really good job. And what's more important, a really good paycheck to do this. So I'm kind of, that did not go unnoticed. But when I did it, I decided I wanted to be a better triathlete than I was a swimmer. And I wanted to right some of the wrongs that I had made as a swimmer. And part of that is age and maturity, that I was able to do things a lot differently and have a slightly different perspective. But some of it was having that experience as a swimmer and learning from where I came up short. And to hear my resume, yes, I won the Pan American Games, I won the Pan Pacific Games. I did not make the Olympic team, and I will wear that like a hair shirt until the day I die, right? That is the one thing that everybody wants, and I didn't get it. I came really, really close, but I didn't come close enough. So I walked away feeling like my swimming career was a failure for that one reason and that one reason alone. And I just decided in my triathlon career that I needed to give myself, and not a lot, because I'm incredibly driven, I'm insanely competitive. And I'm doing this because like the opportunity, like what I gave up and the salary I gave up, like that was I have to go all in on this. I have to be really deliberate about what I'm looking for, because there was so much more to be had just by staying in my job, financially, in terms of what we consider to be success. But I learned that I had to give myself a little bit of grace, in that if I missed a repeat in the pool at Stanford by 1/10 of a second, I would wear that 1/10 of a second for the entire day, through all of my classes, through the second workout, be a brat to all of my friends and my suite mates and blah, 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 because I missed one repeat of an 8,500 meter session by 1/10 of a second. And that kind of self-beating is not positive. So I think I've had a little bit more perspective in that consistency is what matters. And so I may not hit every, well, I kind of do hit all the power intervals, but I may not hit every, I may not hit every workout, right? Some workouts are going to be a complete bust. But what I say to myself at the end of the day, and I'll take Sunday, for example. I had a long run on Sunday and I had some intervals in there, and they were all heart rate driven, because I'm just kind of getting back into the meat of some training after Ironman Texas. And my heart rate was sky high and I was running so slow. And I was like, this cannot be all I have to give. And I was like, Dede, it's a beautiful day. You're healthy enough to be out here running for 2 hours and 15 minutes. So what are you really complaining about? And I came back and I uploaded my file and I turned the Training Peaks box green. So the worst thing I do is turn a box green and put another brick in the wall towards tomorrow, where things will be better. And so I have that perspective. I wish I had told myself as a swimmer, and I wish I had learned the lesson more younger in my career, but no one workout, no one repeat is going to define you as an athlete. And moreover, and this is something else I learned both from my swimming and my triathlon career, a lot of people ask me, some of my coached athletes will be like, what's your PR in the 70.3? And I was like, I have no idea. I know places, and I know where I finished and whether or not I thought it was a good race for me. But the times are irrelevant. And if you ask me what my best time was in the 200 meter backstroke, or what my time was at the Olympic trials in 1992, I have no idea. But I know that my teammates made me team captain, and that's something that I'm incredibly proud of. I know that I walked on to the Stanford swim team and ended up getting a full ride as an athlete for the work that I put in, the improvements that I made. So when you walk away from your triathlon career, you're not going to remember one track session. You're not going to remember one workout. You're going to remember the friends that you made and the community that you built and the healthy lifestyle that you were able to live while you were able to do it. So there's so much more to the sport than a single result. And because the sport is so thankless, you have to grab onto those things, because those are the things that actually really matter, honestly, in my opinion. But maybe that's why I never won Kona. I don't know.
No, definitely. I think that's a good way to put it. And not one race result either.
Yes,
so,
correct.
So I know we had a handful of athletes actually doing their first full Ironman this year. And since you you've raced many and you've commentated on many and you've seen really great performances and really awful ones. I was wondering what's your best piece of advice for triathletes going to train and compete at their first full?
It's a broad statement, and I don't want to say it's a cop out, but it's honestly true. There is nothing that you should be doing for the first time on race day. You should be, if your race is going to be a wetsuit swim, you should be swimming in your wetsuit. And if you don't have access to open water, you should be swimming in the wetsuit in the pool. I don't care. Swim in your wetsuit. You should be practicing your transitions. Like with the athletes that I coach, I actually, because they're so obsessed with, like, again, turning the boxes green on Training Peaks, that I put 30 minutes of transition practice into Training Peaks. Practice your transitions. Practice your fueling. It's hard to do because training is different than racing. And so you might go out on a training ride and you stop into the gas station. You're like, oh man, like the Coke and the Pop-Tart sounds a lot more appealing than just sticking with my race fueling. But pick a couple of your big sessions going into the race. And I want to say no fewer than 5, and replicate exactly what you are going to do on race day with your fueling in training. That includes getting up 2.5 hours or 3 hours before the start of your training day and eating your race breakfast, and exactly replicating. And if you have to change your bike and run route because you need to swing back by home to refill bottles because you can't get whatever your nutrition is and you can't carry enough of it and you can't refill at the local gas station with whatever it is you're taking, change your route. Like, absolutely replicate your race nutrition. Run in your race shoes. If you're wearing carbon, again, don't wear it every run, but you should do a couple of lead up runs, key sessions in the carbon. Like nothing new on race day, and practice every aspect. Practice stripping your wetsuit really, really quickly. All of those things. And yeah, that's it. Nothing new, and practice every detail. And mostly the fueling. You need to eat more than you think you do.
Yeah, definitely. Probably good advice for any level of race, but especially for a full Ironman.
Yes.
And so coming into the more professional side, I think probably a lot of people want to know what it's like doing commentary for Ironman races, because I know sometimes you sit at home and watch them and I'm like, how can she talk for like 8 hours? Because it seems like you would run out of things to talk about, but yet you're commentating on the swim and the bike and the run. And I'm sure you've had opportunities to commentate with and alongside some really cool people. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about maybe some favorite memories you've had, or like amazing races you've gotten to see.
Yeah, it's weird to me. I really love the comment. I really enjoy the commentary again. And I think it comes back to the fact that I am just such an incredible fan of this sport. I'm not a fan of every athlete in it, and that makes some of the commentary difficult. And I try not to let that shine through, but it's really hard. I was amazed when they offered me the opportunity to do the commentary, and I'm an introvert. Like I don't like going to parties. I have like 15 friends that I know would nearly give their lives for me, and vice versa. I don't have 400 friends that I go to parties with every weekend. Like I'm an introvert. And so being out and on like that is it's hard. It's really, really hard for me, but I love the sport so very much. But I want to be good at it. So I think the thing that's hardest about it are the comments that we get. And I actually started to get I've grown a little bit of confidence over the years. I'll listen to a podcast, or God forbid, I shouldn't do it. Like people are like, why do you even go there? But I'll go on Slow Twitch and like read some of the things that people say about our commentary. And the general rule is that they suck. And I'm like, okay, if I could engage with whoever it is that in their basement being angry is saying that we suck, I would say, well, how do we suck and how can we do better? Like, I will 100% take constructive feedback all of the time because we want to do a good job. We're in there because we love the sport and we want other people to love it too. So that is why, I mean, maybe some of the commentators are in there because they're getting paid. And yes, we do get paid for what we do, but it's not enough to take the abuse that we sometimes get. Like, I will take constructive feedback all the time and have done so, but don't just say that we suck. And then the other thing that really bothers me, and this is less so now that we're not on Facebook as much and they have quieted, there is a YouTube ability to comment. But when we first started doing it open on Facebook and the comments, you could just screen, like, they would edit them for what other people could see, but we in the studio see the unedited version. And I would get so upset by some of the cruelty that people would hurl at us for things that are beyond our reason, right? I know we don't have enough cameras out there. I know you want to see so-and-so on camera. Cameras are expensive and this is a free show. So there are things that we can do and things that we can't do. If you guys want to start paying $15 to watch an Ironman broadcast, well then yeah, we'll get a lot more cameras and drones and everything else, but it's free. It's free. And so there are budgets, and I like having an MBA from Wharton, I'm sort of like, I understand that conceptually, but people get angry at us for it. And that, for me, I have to grow like a thicker skin for that. But I finally drew the line when someone called me stupid. And that really bothered me because what I wanted to do, literally, they had to calm me down. Someone was like, she's so effing stupid. And I was like, dude, I'm sorry. I don't get this way. I don't get this way. I will go toe to toe and play resume bingo with just about anyone. I went to Choate. I went to Stanford. I went to Wharton. I was a vice president on Wall Street. And the only thing in my life that I think I failed at is that I didn't make the Olympic team. I am not stupid. So that is the hard part of it. And I take the feedback, I take it too personally because I love it so much. Some of the great things, I mean, I learn a lot. Selfishly, I learn a ton watching the best athletes execute at their craft in these races. And so when I'm out there racing and something happens, I'm like, oh, but remember when that happened to Heather Jackson at this race? And what did she do? And how did that work out? I can draw on that experience as if I've raced it myself. So not only do I have now 20 years of racing experience, but I have all of these experiences from watching these amazing pros do what they do. And so I've learned just so much in the process. And we have an amazing team. And that's not just the commentators that I work with, but the people putting on the production are great. And the people at Ironman lend us an awful lot of support. Like when I get really upset and down about people being super gnarly and nasty to us, they have my back. And I'm like, no, guys, but if I do suck, you really need to tell me, because they're like, don't go on slow twitch. That is the universal rule.
Commentator always when we listen, because it's nice to have, I think, not just a commentator and not just a talking head, right? An actual athlete who does it and who knows what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think that makes it for me. I mean, people will, and honestly, one of my favorite commentators to work with is Matt Lieto, and he takes a little bit of flack because he isn't racing anymore, and he might not know the athletes quite the same way I do, but I feel like we debate. And I'll say, like, his position is too aggressive, and Matt will say, well, no, it's not, and here's why. We will debate these things, and to me, that's the education. Like, I want to educate people. Like, why is he, doing what he's doing right now, and try to explain that, because that's really what we're doing. We're trying to make people better athletes. I'm a better athlete for doing the commentary. I want to make people who are watching the broadcasts smarter so that they can be like, oh, maybe I should try that in my training. Like, oh, I never knew that. Like, that's a really good tip. And so that's I think why I'm so passionate about it. Like, I just want people to have a great experience through the sport and love it as much as I have loved it and continue to love it.
Do you have a most memorable moment in your career personally?
Athletically or commentary wise?
Yeah, athletically.
I think winning Ultraman Worlds probably would be my most memorable, and not for the reasons that you think. Like, yes, it was, to me, it was amazing. Like, the patience that I'd had since I started swimming competitively at the age of 5 to wait until I was 52 to finally win a world title was pretty, that's a lesson in patience. So that was amazing to finally feel like, okay, I can add world champion to my resume for whatever that's worth, but my own internal resume, like that I was as good as I thought I could be at it, was incredibly satisfying. And the race went extremely smoothly. But the number one reason that that is the most memorable event, and Florida's not far off of it, except it's a little bit, because it was a world championship event, it's slightly more special. Ultraman is a shared event. So for those of you who don't know, Ultraman is 3 days and 320 miles, and it's 100% self-supported. So you have to bring a crew. And I had a great crew for Ultraman Florida, but I learned a lot in Ultraman Florida. And when I selected my crew for Ultraman Worlds, each person was hand selected, number one, for a skill, a personality quality, and the fact that I knew that they would take it as seriously as I did. And it was the most extraordinary group of individuals that I could have in my life, that were there with me and got to share that experience across all of those days, the good, the bad, the all of it. Like, we rented this crew vehicle that was, it was, if you look at my socials back to last November, you'll see pictures of it. We rented like the world's first Sprinter van. She was like a 1970s Sprinter van with, I'm not even joking, like velvet interior, and like there was like mood lighting in there. And she was this sort of, we debated whether she was like maroon or mauve or burgundy, but she adopted the name Burgundy Betty. So Tales from Burgundy Betty will stay with Burgundy Betty. Burgundy Betty almost didn't make it around the island. She was huffing and puffing up some of those hills, I'll tell you. But that experience, sharing it, everyone goes to, through triathlon, and you have your village, you have your spouse or your siblings or your parents or your coach or your whoever, your training partners, who like, they keep you accountable and they lift you up and they calm you down and they do all of the things, and they come to the race and they support you and they pick up your pee-soaked bike at the end of an Ironman and wheel it out of transition for you and do all of these amazing things. Take that and put it on steroids. And that's what the Ultraman crew was. And to share that experience and the commitment that they made, and that we did it together. And to me, that just is what made it so unforgettable.
Well, Dede, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I know everyone really enjoyed listening to you now, and then, on your, where are you headed next for commentating and racing? Where can we see you?
Commentating Chattanooga this weekend. It's been a busy May.
Yeah,
I've been 3 weeks in a row now with a commentary. So yeah, we had St. George, and then Gulf Coast, and then Chattanooga, and then I have 2 weeks off, and then Boulder. And race wise, I am next up, because I had so much commentary in May, I didn't want to jam a race in there. So I'm not racing actually till the end of June. I'm planning to go to the 70.3 in Mont Tremblant. Okay.
Awesome. Well, we will look for you next weekend. We have about 15 athletes, or this weekend rather, going up there to Chattanooga. So,
great.
And good luck at your next race. But thank you. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys. And if anybody has, questions or whatever, don't use my website, because I never check my website email. I always I'm pretty sure my mom is the only one that goes to my website, and as a result, I never check the email from that. But I am on Instagram, and if you message me on Instagram, I'm pretty good about responding. So if anybody has a question or anything, I'm happy to engage that way. So happy to help, and just want to spread the triathlon love.
So much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.